Hello, gringos. How are we today? Hope you're having a splendid day. It's been really super duper cold one here. My screen looks different today. I've got like loads of people all over my screen. This looks really nice. If we can leave it like that, that would be awesome. Don't know exactly what's different. Big hello from UK. Lots of people from around the world already. We got Vienna, Liverpool, Toronto, Newcastle with all of their snow. Hope you're staying warm up there. Colorado, Florida, Nottingham, Texas, Vegas. So now it's going too fast and I can't recognize it. Delaware, New Zealand. Wow, this is a proper little multicultural session we got cooking up here today. Well, I thought I'd take it back a little bit. I know a few comments from the last couple of blues things was that I started to go off on a few tangents of more complicated things, introducing modes and some other stuff like that. So I thought I'd bring it back home today and we'd have a bit of a look at this thing, the blue note, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. I was probably 14 or 15 where I first heard about this thing called the blues scale. And I guess the main thing that I want to help you out with is not practicing the blues scale, because I spent hours and hours and hours of my life going and even longer trying to figure out the best fingering for like in the other patterns. And what I realized like 20 years later is that no one ever plays the blues scale like a scale. So really, this idea of having it being called the blues scale and people practicing the blues scale is kind of pointless. It's not the right approach. The blues scale is like, the blue note is a note that we can add to the minor pentatonic scale to add a little bit of flavor. And it's a very dissonant sound. And what I mean by dissonant is it's a crunchy kind of an interval. It's the interval of a flat 5 or an augmented fourth. It's the diminished fifth or augmented fourth. It was the interval that if you wrote about in, I can't even think of what year that would be, early Renaissance period. If you wrote music with the flat 5 interval, it meant that you were heretic and you'd be burned as a witch, right? So it's a pretty powerful one. They call it the devil's interval. So it kind of makes sense that the devil's music, the blues music, has a strong association with this flat 5. When you just play the flat 5 interval on its own, you can hear it's pretty dissonant, like crunchy. It doesn't, it wants to, oh, that's better. That's a nice, right? And one of the interesting things about this flat 5 interval is that it's contained with dominant 7th chords. So when you're playing a blues, you're using this flat 5 interval all the time. If I just demonstrate that for you so you can see nice and clearly. Here's a little A7. So there's big A7 that most of you be familiar with. I'm just choosing to play that note, and that note, which is the root note, the flat 7, and the major 3rd. They're the notes that would make up an A7. I use all sorts of different fingerings for this chord. It's a good way of playing these chords. But this interval, this is the flat 5 interval, the augmented 4th sound. You can hear it's very dissonant. Once we pop that bass note on, still got a lot of dissonance. And interestingly, if we go to a D7 chord, look, this is like, there's like a D7 a shape that you'd be familiar with, just the bottom part of that. But again, it's got that flat 5 interval. So there's the A, D, back to A. So every chord has the devil's interval in it. Back to D for a 12-bar blues. A. And there is a point for me explaining this all to you. So that flat 5 interval sounds pretty dissonant, right? On its own, it's a bit too not so usable, but that sound is contained within a chord, and in context, sometimes it doesn't quite sound as crunchy as it does when it's played on its own. Now, when we use this flat 5 interval in a blues, when we've added this flat 5 note, which I'll show you in the relative to the minor pentatonic in just a sec, it's really important that we realize that it's a pretty powerful kind of dissonance and that you don't want to be using it all the time. It's one of another common kind of beginner mistake is they start learning the minor pentatonic scale and they're like, oh yeah, but when I improvise now I'm only playing the minor pentatonic scale and I'm trapped by the minor pentatonic scale, and then somebody shows them the blues scale and they go, wicked! And then they trap themselves in the blues scale, but usually just playing it straight up and down. Which is like, it's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But much better to just think of that note relative to other licks and phrases that you know, that you can just pop in and out of it. Okay, so let's have a look at it now in context of the scale shape. So I would recommend that when you're practicing your minor pentatonic scales, that you normally start on the thinner string. And the reason for that, I know it's easier to find that root note on the thicker string, but if you start a solo ever, like going up the scale from that lowest note, just sounds really, really kind of beginnery. So much better to start up on the thin strings where we should do a solo. So minor pentatonic. Here's the blue note. Most people would know this note here, the 8th fret on the 3rd string. We're in the key of A. That's the blue note. Back to minor pentatonic. Minor pentatonic. We add it here with the 2nd finger, 6th fret of the 5th string, and then minor pentatonic. And back up. So you can see scale-wise, if we imagine that's key scale, I've got a backing track prepared, but so it's using it in that way, in a kind of a scalular fashion, isn't a bad thing. But what you'll tend to find if you'll either go from like minor pentatonic scaly kind of patterns, or if you've got some licks, you might play some licks with the minor pentatonic and then suddenly bust into blues scale. And it's just not as good as it could be. What you're better off is thinking of it as an additional note that you can add into licks that you already know and just slipping in and out of it. Trying to find, what I personally chose to do was to find licks that use the blue note in each pattern of the minor pentatonic scale. So I completely abandoned the idea of looking at it as a scale that would be played all the time and just looked for licks that used the note. Right? It's like recipe, rather than trying to deliberately force a particular ingredient into stuff, it's like looking for a recipe where it's already used and people have experimented and found a nice blend of things. Yeah? Let's have a look at some. So, you don't always have to play as in like a scale. You can go up to this note. Here's the minor pentatonic. You just slide up to it and then back off. Here's a really nice, doing a real quick slide backwards and forwards to the 3rd finger. You've also got this, being able to do a bend up to that one. Not only, that's the common kind of tone bend there from the 7th fret, but you can get to that semitone. Again, rather than always thinking that it has to go all of the way down, having this nice pick, this is the 5th fret of the 5th string, hammer on flick off of the blue note. Go to the minor 3rd there. Another nice one. Some people might prefer to use 3rd and 4th fingers. Okay, somebody's saying that they haven't got a video. Okay, is everything all right? Moderators, Fan, Rich, Lorraine, is everything okay audio-wise? I'm noticing a few people saying that they got no video or no video is good. Yeah, audio is fine as well. Okay.
Audio,
cool.
video, all good.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Amazing how one little comment can kind of throw me right off course. Anyway, so another nice little one in just staying in box 1 where people are probably most comfortable. Either have it's 7th fret, 8th fret, 7th fret, 5th fret. For me, it's a lot easier to use 2nd finger, hammer on 3rd finger. Okay, it's a nice little kind of quickish one. Okay, one more here with the common one, just because I love this lick. So here we're just playing, but when we use our driving finger, this one, to play the thinner string at the same time. Okay, really nice ways of using this one and that one. So taking a few of these ideas as licks and just thinking about vocabulary that you can learn that uses the blue note, rather than thinking of running up and down the scales, because we're going to, as we move around the neck a little bit, it'll start to make a little bit more sense. There's one other thing that I remember when, I can't remember who it was that mentioned it to me, but they said, oh, you know, you can play that blue note on the 2nd string as well. And I was like, what do you mean? It kind of blew my mind a bit, so I'll show you guys as well. So this note here, this is also here, the 4th fret of the 2nd string. It's the same note, E flat. So then you can get all these. It's such a cool place. It's kind of unexpected. Remember as well that you've got this nice little blue note here, not just here. Now, where it starts to come real fun, when you think about like pattern 2, here's pattern 2 of the minor pentatonic. So this is one of those ones where I spent ages trying to work this out, because like there's one here that's kind of obvious. And then you got this nice one up here as well, but again, having it as the top note feels a bit weird. But here, having this, like, is that the right fingering, or should you go? And like, I had literally this pad and paper where I was writing down all of the different possible fingering or placement of the blue note in each one of the 5 patterns of the minor pentatonic. And I was trying to practice them. I was trying to work out which is the right fingering, which is the smoothest way of getting from the lowest note to the highest note. And I don't know why I didn't tweak, because I must have spent like 100 hours on this stuff. And looking back, I just want to slap myself and go, dude, just learn a few licks that use the note. You don't need to play the scale up and down. The scales are just a framework for us to put vocabulary in. The idea of playing a whole scale up and down has some kind of uses. If you learn like melodic patterns, you may learn, or whatever. There are little sequences that you can apply to a scale to make it sound more musical. But a scale just straight up and down, like, whoever went to the Albert Hall to see the best scale player ever? I'll tell you who, nobody, right? It's just not, that's not the point of scales. So try to always think of the blue note. Take each of your minor pentatonic patterns that you know already and learn where the blue note is relative to your pattern, and then see if you can find some licks or phrases where you just incorporate it in, but don't change your mindset. Don't change the way you think about it to be, oh, I'm now jumping into playing the blue scale. It's just a color tone. It's a note that you can add to the minor pentatonic that might make it a little bit more interesting. So if we go back to pattern 2 now, just so that we're not spending the whole lesson on box 1. So here's the root note for the A, or here. Let's start on this top bit. So loads of your classic blues licks. All based around this little box. And the blue note is here. It's kind of, I call this diagonal because it's kind of sideways on. Does that make sense? Got loads of little cool things we can do. And here we've got, of course, this or here we can bend up to that little. You can bend up to that little blue note or the tone. Then we're back into minor pentatonic land. This is that lick. And here, see, having the little phrase. You could use that one little phrase all around the neck because it's little. Because it's a little usable shape. It's a lot easier to take it around different parts of the guitar neck. Again, it's a lick. It's a little phrase that you can use rather than trying to think of these big scale shapes. I tell you, of all of the things that I spent hours on over the years, learning and practicing scales up and down instead of spending much more time making music with them is one of the things that I kind of go like, yeah, I kind of wish I hadn't done that. Like it's difficult to regret it because it all forms part of your playing makeup, and I'm sure in some ways there was some benefit from it. I'm not saying it's without benefit at all, but for the most part, the benefit comes from learning licks and phrases that use the notes of the scale rather than playing scales up and down. And I'm just trying to help you all out there not make the same mistake I did, which is practicing playing scales up and down a lot. So let's have a little chat about or question. So I completely burst into this assuming that everyone had been on a club before, but if you're new around here, right, we've got a couple of different areas here where we can communicate. We've got a couple of moderators today. We've got Richard, who started off doing all of the stuff there. We've got Fanny, and we've got Lorraine here. All three of the mods are about today, which is super cool. There are a few different ways of kind of getting in touch, and the way this kind of thing works when we get into Q&A and chatting a little bit more, because it's not just me chatting to you for a whole hour. That would be, might as well just make a YouTube video, right? So the idea is that we're communicating, and I want to know what questions you got. So there's a chat, and the chat is like chatting for us. Richard monitors it. Fanny's kind of checking out the chat. I've got it up on the corner of the screen, but I can't really read it properly while I'm trying to talk to you because I'm not quite that clever. So I might have a quick look down there from time to time. But if you've got a specific question, what you want to do is look for the question box, which is down the bottom there, down the bottom of the screen. Why has it disappeared off mine now? I think it's usually under the more thing. Are we under the more thing today? Yeah, oh, it's called Q&A. So if you've got a specific question, pop it in the Q&A. And then, looks like there's a few there already. And then every now and again, I'm going to pop over and ask, is it Richard or Fanny who's doing it? Is it you, Fan, or is it Richard?
I can do it. There's no problem.
You can do it? Okay.
Yes, of course.
Your Q&A monitor today.
Okay.
Okie dokie. So Fan will check it, and if there's kind of a recurring theme, maybe she'll just tell me and say, hey, loads of people are asking about this or that, and I might do it. But if it's kind of a more specific question, if you want to, well, we can, if you do a thing, if Fanny picks your question, you put your hand up and then you can come and actually ask me the question. If you do come and ask me the question, try and keep it nice and concise, because there's loads of us here. And while I'd love to hang out and chat with you one day pub and hear your life story and how many guitars you got, this isn't the place for that kind of conversation. So save that for the pub one day. Fan, have we got any questions?
Yes, we do. Our first question is from Chris.
Okay.
He's asking to explain the benefits of learning different blues licks. He started to learn some, but he's at a loss of what to do with them.
Okay, good question. Okay, so we've talked about this on this show a few times already. The idea with learning licks is that licks are like words that you use in a language. So the scale would be an alphabet, and the licks are the words that you use to speak the blues language. So I'm kind of, excuse me if you've heard this analogy before, but like if I'm going on holidays somewhere where I don't know the language, let's say I'm going to Ukraine, right? And I don't know any Ukrainian language at all. Would I be better off studying their alphabet and learning how to play really fast or say really fast and smoothly their alphabet, like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, like, or would I be better off learning a few key phrases like please and thank you and hello and, you know, is there a table here tonight, or can I have a hotel, or whatever, like basic things that you need to be able to communicate with. So it is all about these little phrases. And what you find if you start digging into the blues a bit more is that most blues guitar players use the same/similar licks. Now, most of the greats have their own kind of vocabulary as well that gives them a unique thing, but their choices of which phrases they put in their vocabulary is the thing that makes their playing so beautiful. I often think of it a bit like poetry, because poets don't use words the same as we use regularly. They put words together in unique and beautiful ways that somehow convey a meaning other than the words themselves, right? So when you get Dylan Thomas, fire green as grass, huh? What? Fire green as grass? That doesn't make any sense. Fire's not green. No, but fire as powerful as the grass is green. Now we're getting somewhere. So it kind of communicates something that's more than just the words. And I feel like that's one of the ways that one of the things that's happening by our choices of vocabulary that we use. And when you learn licks, like God knows how many licks I've learned over the years, must be hundreds, maybe even thousands. I'm trying to catalog it at the moment, so I'll let you know in a few months how many I've got. But you find that some of the licks resonate more with yourself than other ones do. So when I'm improvising, I'm not generally using the licks that didn't resonate with me. I'm using the ones that just naturally I had some sort of affinity with, the ones that felt good for me to play. There are other ones that I'm learning, or that I might know about, that I might deliberately consciously try and use. Like you might deliberately consciously try and use a new word in a new language if you're trying to work it into your vocabulary as you're progressing learning in a new language. Sorry, getting a bit tongue-tied. But yeah, licks is a really, really important thing. Just as a little example, let me do a quick little solo. So let's, if I was doing a solo and I was using that A minor pentatonic box 2, right? And here's the music's going along and I go. Now, I'm already starting to add licks because I just can't help it. But wouldn't it say a bit more if we had that solo and it went... I'd much rather listen to that second one where there was just one little phrase. I just picked and then I mucked around with that one phrase. The language analogy definitely falls apart at this point because it's not like you can learn a new word and then muck around with a word and swap the letters around and try and find interesting ways of using it. It doesn't work. I guess we can kind of conjugate a verb, can't we? So we can have run and ran and running and that kind of thing, which the link is definitely a little bit tenuous. It doesn't really hold up, right? But the idea of thinking of licks as words in a language, and by learning lots of words, you increase your vocabulary and you can communicate more things. I think that's about as strong a way I've ever found to describe how the blues works. And the proof, I don't want you to just believe me here. I want you to use your ears to discover the truth here for yourself. So if you listen to like Albert King and B.B. King, let's take the Kings, Albert King, Freddie King, B.B. King. Have a little bit of time listening to all three of them and then go and listen to Eric Clapton or Stevie Ray Vaughan. And it's just like Eric Clapton's solos are mixtures of all of those things with his own unique stuff as well. I'm not saying it's all just derivative and that Eric Clapton just nicked their licks and that's all there is to him. I'm not saying that. I'm saying he's borrowed their vocabulary and the way they're using it, their grammar, their phrases, their accent. He's using that, but also bringing his own stuff to the party too. But if you never use the licks, people won't recognize what language you're speaking. So you can think like using our English language, we can write it obviously in English, but we could also write it in French and German, and lots of other languages around the world use English letters. But it's the combination of those letters that determines the language, whether it's going to sound bluesy or jazzy or country or, even within that, sub-genres of blues will be determined by the language that you choose, by the licks that you learn. So learning licks is really, really important. I teach loads of licks over on the website, on the current blues courses, on the new blues immersion thing that we're having starting later in the year. That one's full of licks. It really is, I think, it's the key place to start. If you're learning the blues, learn the minor pentatonic scale first. That's a really good starting point, just good for the dexterity, for learning where the letters are and getting the dexterity to play them, like picking technique and fretting technique. I'm not saying practicing scales doesn't have some advantages, but it's not going to help you communicate. There we go. Okay, Fan.
Yes, we have loads of questions.
Okay,
if you can give some advice to Isabella on how to play more smooth rather than sounding jumpy or jerky when it comes to playing solos.
Okay. So jumpy or jerky is a little, I'm trying to imagine what it is that you mean. There's a couple of things that I can think of here. One, when people talk about fluidity and playing smoothly, it's usually to do with technique, and that if you're trying to play things that are too difficult technically, and what I mean by technically is like the physical things, like moving your fingers, finger stretching, the synchronization between your picking hand and your fretting hand. If those things are not quite there, when you go to play a lick or a phrase, it starts to feel a bit clumsy and kind of falls over itself, and you might miss a note and then go back and try and get it again. And those things kind of create a lot of tension because you're physically struggling to perform the licks. So if you want your playing to sound smoother, then you probably want to play things that are well within your technical ability. Right, so that's one of those things. Like when you listen to David Gilmour play, it's so effortless sounding. He's not doing anything like really super complicated. He's doing things within his technical limits. Maybe he edges it sometimes, but he's mostly playing within his limits. So it sounds really powerful and really clean and relaxed and easy. Whereas if you listen to other people that are playing like right on the edge of their technique, Jeff Beck was my favorite example. I saw Jeff Beck a load of times live, and he would sometimes fall off the skateboard. Like he would be doing this thing and it'd be like, oh my God, is he going to, oh, and he wouldn't quite, like it'd be some ascending run. It's getting faster and faster. Then it'd kind of fizzle rather than climaxing. But it was so beautiful to watch somebody as amazing as him being able to kind of really push his own boundaries. You know, that was interesting, but it in those moments it wasn't fluid. You could feel like he was creating this tension and really pushing his limits. So if you want to play within it, you want to keep it easy, you want it to feel fluid, then keep it simple and work on your technique. See if you can. I think a really good thing is to be honest with our own technique and kind of examine our technique sometimes, even if it's just like grabbing your phone, leaning it up against a coffee cup, put a backing track on your computer or on the phone itself, and then jam along with it and watch it back and be honest about what it is. Like, does this look easy, or is it like, because usually, here's another little hint for you, if things look easy, they usually are, and if they look really difficult, there's usually some technical thing. It's like when you watch Ronnie O'Sullivan play snooker. It looks effortless, but that's nearly impossible, that stuff that he does. Even just lining up a really straight shot and getting the ball in is hard enough. But he makes it look effortless because it's within his technical level, right? So when you watch yourself back, look at it and go, oh, does that look easy? Does that look really hard? Oh, that looks really hard, and it felt hard. Yeah, it felt hard. What's wrong here? And then start to try and examine it and see if you can figure out what the things are you need to work on technically. Is your string bending a bit sour? Is your fretting hand not flexible enough, like you don't have enough stretch between the fingers? The synchronization between the pick hand and the fingers off, because that's a really big one. That's really important. There's lessons in the technique area of the website. There's lessons that cover many of these things, definitely not everything, but quite a lot of things. Maybe that's something we can address on a future blues thing. We can have a look at everyone's technical problems. We'll see if we can't summarize them into a little. There we go, Lorraine. Nice little, or Fanny. Next, when we send out the question thing, let's ask what technical things within the blues area people are struggling with, and we'll see if we, if we can't do a technical special, a blues technique session.
Yes.
Hopefully that helps. Isabella. Yes, Fan.
Yes. Next question from Pat. What are the best notes to bend into, slide into, or hammer on within the pentatonic scale?
Okay. Bending and sliding and okie dokie. Let's go to a close-up. So, here's our minor pentatonic scale. If we move to the next pattern up, and what I mean by that is the next note of the minor pentatonic scale on each string, so that this would be like adding pattern 2 on top. So that would mean this is the next note. So this note, if you're going to bend this note, it has to be a tone. On this note, actually, you can put a curl there as well. Right? There's a possibility on that note, just because it's the flat third and one of the blues accents is pretty little. It's not really a bend, it's a little curl. Now, if we're staying strictly pentatonic, this note, if we were going to bend this note with the first finger, we would have to bend it up to there, which is just not going to happen, right? Even I can't bend. No, I thought, let's see if I can. I can't, definitely. I can get it to a beat. I can bend it with it to there, but even then I'm worrying about my calluses at that point. I'm going to stop doing that. So this note's probably not going to bend. This note is going to bend to be that one. So if you're going to bend that one, it's going to be a tone. This one again, I'm not going to bend that up there. It's just not going to happen. This note is going to bend to the next note of the scale, here, or you can hear it there. If you think your blues scale, you could bend that a semitone. And here, this one I know I can bend. So this note I can bend. If I pull it down a tone, that's not a beginner bend. It's possible. I thought I'd point it out. Now, the thicker strings, it's possible to bend the thicker strings, right? It's sometimes a fun thing to do, but for the most part, most of the vocabulary that we have in blues doesn't bend on the thicker strings, right? Or not much. But here's an interesting little twist that I want to move into. The notes that are contained in the minor pentatonic scale aren't the only notes in the alphabet. It's almost like there's a simplified alphabet, which is the minor pentatonic scale, and then we get it slightly more complicated and we add this blue note, the flat 5. But there's two other notes that sound wicked in the blues, and that is the 6th and the 9th. Now, in the blues immersion course, I teach it as being called a blues hybrid scale because it's kind of a mixture of the Dorian mode and the blues scale. But it's just really, again, it's not so much like playing it as a scale all the time. It's looking for licks that are within it. So, and the reason for this, it makes it a lot, you've got a lot more notes to choose from. So this is what the first of the notes I want to bring out. This is the 9th, right? So here's minor pentatonic. We can definitely add that note. Stevie Ray Vaughan uses it all. He uses a lot of this. That 9th note, right? Now, if we've decided that that's okay, we can bend it up to that minor pentatonic scale. Here's the minor pentatonic. Right, so we can use that note. We can use the semitone bend up to that, and then if we're here, we got a tone bend. Now, interestingly, exactly the same thing happens on the 2nd string because we already had this. But this note, this is one of my favorite notes in a blues. This is the 6th, the major 6th. I sometimes, in fact, somebody mentioned Robin Ford in the chat I saw earlier. He does this thing where instead of playing the minor pentatonic, you play the minor pentatonic, but the 7th you replace with the 6th, and you get this. It's a really nice little trick. But this note here, the 6th, I'm getting a bit note heavy there, but I'm just trying to demonstrate that all of these notes are all sounding pretty cool. So when it comes to bending, the top string, 8th fret a tone, 7th fret a semitone, same on the B string. On the 3rd string, a tone bend from the 7th fret, semitone, and the 5th fret tone, if you want to get a little bit clever with it. But so all of those are options that you might like to explore in a blues. Again, the principle applies to all of the other patterns as well. Remember, there's 5 patterns, so each of those patterns have flat 5s and 6s and 9s around them that you can mix in. But what's really interesting is that people play in different parts of the neck more confidently than others, and there are certain licks that fit well in certain places. And I know right at the beginning there I used one little phrase that I used in 3 different patterns, but that's kind of rare, to be honest. Most licks have a particular pattern where they're found. I call it a framework. So like pattern 1 framework is the one that we've mostly been working in today. Pattern 2 framework would be the one that's like the next pattern up the neck. So most licks have a pattern where they're most comfortable to play, and most people play what's comfortable and easy. Nobody seeks out to deliberately play a phrase the harder way possible. You just move to the part of the neck where you can play it comfortably, right? But like, who wouldn't do that? You'd be crazy not to. So yeah, stay aware. I would recommend exploring these different options within the minor pentatonic box 1, if that's what you're most comfortable with. But then try and extrapolate the idea and run with it and move it into whatever pattern you're most comfortable with after pattern 1, be it 5 or 2, 3. Different people have a different pattern that they learn as the next one. For me, it was pattern 4 for some reason. I learned pattern 1, then I learned pattern 4. So I'd always be jumping up and down. I'd learn here. and I jump them between those two spots in the key of A. Obviously, different parts of the neck. Sorry, I've got a cable, headphone cable here that I keep sitting on. So yeah, that's the options, and all of those notes could be bent or slid or whatever. There's no rules as to way, particularly with sliding and stuff, you could slide or whatever into any of them. So I think that was a hopefully comprehensive enough answer. Yeah. Okay. Fan.
Okay, I have a good question from Philip. He's asking how to introduce soul or emotion into your blues playing.
Oh God. Okay. Geez, I'm not sure I've had enough sleep for that one. That's a big question. I'm even going to have to sit back and think about it for a second. How do you introduce emotion into your blues playing? So, where does it come from? Where does emotion come from anyway when you're playing? So it's a really big question, right? And I don't want to go too philosophical because for some of you it'll just be like, but we can communicate something through music, and I don't think anyone really knows exactly how it works. We know it's a language, and we know that we can communicate ideas, and that there are. My best guess is that if I'm feeling a particular way, when I play something on the guitar, the way that I'm feeling is somehow translated through the notes that I play, or more likely the way that I play them. And a good example of this, and part of the reason why I feel like this is the likely answer, is that if we watch somebody who's very nervous when they play, we can hear it and see it and smell it. It's like, oh my God, this guy's bricking it. That's, you can feel it, you can see it. That even if you couldn't see them, you'd feel it. You'd find it in the music because of the hesitancy in the way that somebody would play. And it's the same when you get people who are not very good but very, very confident. Right, that's another type of person which I feel like they communicate even without seeing them. I can get that feeling through the music. So that's on a very gross kind of version of it. But of course, it's more subtle than that. So I think it's how you feel when you play. And there's a few caveats here. Obviously, you need to be technically proficient enough to be able to put enough sensitivity into it. So if you've only just learned guitar, you're just not going to be able to be expressive enough. You won't have enough touch of dynamic dynamic range, be able to play soft and loud and to know the notes that are going to make it sound really angry or soft or whatever. Particularly softness and delicacy is something that really comes with time and practice. It's very hard to play in a very relaxed and if you're going to play like a beautiful ballad, you can't be nervous and tense with it. It's got to be like super relaxed and simple and like well within your technical boundaries. And so I think that's part of it. I've already touched on a few things, but there's also this, once you've got to the point where you can technically or physically have some command of the instrument. I'm not saying like to be a master of it, but like say you can play some stuff. An exercise that I've recommended to students in the past, which it kind of sounds funny and weird, but it's pretty powerful. So don't do this around people who might mock you or whatever. But if you've got some space or time at home, you've got an afternoon free and there's no one else around, grab your guitar out and start to play and put yourself in think about some really horrible experience that you've had. And I'm just picking on sorrow because sorrow seems to be easier to connect with. I don't know why it's easier to connect with sorrow than it is happiness. But if you really, really put yourself back into that feeling of that really nasty, bad thing, I don't know, your parents broke up or your friend or a sibling died or something, like some heavy stuff, like whatever heavy things that you've had in your life, dwell on one of them and put yourself in that really dark spot and then try and play how it feels. And I'm telling you to do it on your own because it can be pretty powerful. For a lot of people, they find it's a pretty amazing release of emotion. It can be pretty distressing kind of. So that's why I'm like, just be aware of that. but that feeling is something that once you are used to opening the door or allowing this thing to flow out, you don't have to have that feeling all the time. It's almost, I'm getting into stuff that I don't really properly understand. So I'm not trying to say that this is definitely the answer, because I don't really know. It's a very big, deep question. But I feel like it somehow unlocks things that enables you to channel expression more, even without having to dive into that nasty stuff all the time. Because I definitely, like, I'm not thinking of any negative stuff when I'm playing blues or playing this stuff now at all. Like, not even close. I've had a really productive, good day, so we're good. But there's some, when you've experienced that channeling of it, yeah, give it a try. Give it a try. You might find that it's super helpful. I don't know if it's just a unique experience. Maybe other people, other guitar players feel it a different way or have had a different experience. It's a, yeah, big question. Far too big for a Tuesday night at 9:30. But anyway, hopefully that might have helped someone dig into that a little bit. Van.
Yes, this one is a bit more straightforward from Bob and Miles. Is there a blue note for the major pentatonic scale?
Oh, that's a class question. Okay. The answer is no and yes. So no, there's not a blue note. I've never tried to use the flat 5 in a major pentatonic sense, but check this out, because this is really cool. I need to go to the close-up one, which is there. There we go. So I'm going to do it in the key of A, just to keep things really simple. So here's the A blues scale. Now, most of you know that or I assume most of you know that if you move that scale down 3 frets and play the same pattern, but start on the A with the minor pentatonic, we get the A major pentatonic. Now note that it's not the same. You don't, if you want to play A major pentatonic, you don't play that lick down 3 frets. Because then you're playing, it's in F sharp minor, it just sounds like it. If you're playing in A major, even if you're using these notes, that is the root note here and here. These are the ones that you want to be thinking. Right? You're not using the same licks. You're not, or anything. Oh, bit too much bending. Sorry, guys, 1 sec. Yeah, so there's the A major pentatonic. If you play the blues scale, do you know what this is? That note is the minor note from the A minor. And one of the things that you might have noticed when we play blues, sometimes we go minor major. Sounds cool to go minor note to major note. So here, if we do this, we're actually going major pentatonic, minor third, and then to there. So you get this. So the answer is no, there's not really a blues note for the major pentatonic, but if you play the blues scale patterns that you learned for the minor pentatonic and pretend that they're the major pentatonic, you end up with this really nice alternative to a blues note, which is it's really the minor third, but adding the minor third, especially if it's followed by the major third, generally sounds pretty cool. So I think that's a really fun one. I can't remember what song it was that I first figured that out. I was learning a solo, might have been someone like like a country thing, like a Brad Paisley or something, and going like, oh my God, because the example, the transcription was like a really obvious kind of played the scale straight down really quickly or something as a more or less like a lick. So yeah, hopefully that should be a fun one to muck about with. Fan, have we got one? We got time for probably one more, I think.
Yes.
Not a life philosophy type jobby.
No, I'll try not to. Actually, if you can give an example, this was asked twice, of using the B5 in an enclosure, perhaps incorporating it to 3 and B3 as well. I hope that makes sense.
Way, wow, as an enclosure. Okay, so and what an enclosure usually means, let me go to the close-up again. The most common enclosure that we use in blues is this, surrounding this. No, we didn't even touch on this really, but like, there's the minor pentatonic. If we're playing in the key of A over an A7, it's introduced this note, which is the C sharp. And the C sharp we can use over the A7 chord, but when the chord changes to a D7, we can't use the C sharp over that because it just sounds horrible and not in a cool way. So if we're playing over the A, this kind of lick is really common. D, C, C sharp. Now I think what's being asked is going E, E flat, D. So this is really like a long enclosure. Having this E, E flat, D, so this is chromatic, C, C sharp. So I think that's what you meant. Maybe not sure. There are quite a few. This idea of enclosing a note, so playing a note above, below, and then landing on that note, I think is kind of I always associate it with jazz. It definitely happens in blues in this particular context. Actually, I just thought of one other one, one that I really like. It's definitely a jazz lick, but it's a good one for blues players to use because it kind of looks around the minor pentatonic. Playing the minor pentatonic, and then you're going down. Just move the whole hand down one fret, and you're going to play the 4th fret, 7th fret, and then finish back on the minor pentatonic. Just sounds really jazzy. Yeah. So that's a fun little enclosure that you might want to have a bit of a play about with as well. I think that's about a wrap for today. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you're enjoying this blues stuff. I am working so hard on this blues immersion thing. I've created a monster and I'm really just going at it. And yeah, I was filming and editing stuff all day today. I'll be having another filming day tomorrow. I'm super excited about it. I think you guys are as well. All of the stuff that I've touched on today, everything there is included in that course already, just with a hell of a lot more detail, a lot bigger explanations of all of those things, and more exercises on how it all works. So yeah, still haven't confirmed the release date because I've got loads of stuff on at the moment. I want to make sure that I can deliver it like absolutely top notch. So I'm trying to get a little bit further ahead with it before we go anywhere like that. So yeah, I hope you found that interesting. I feel like it's one of those things where we can take it back. It's a kind of a simple idea, but you can get a lot of mileage from it. It's still something I explore after having known it for 40 years. So it's still, hopefully, most of you will have a little bit of fun playing about with it. Big thank you to Fanny for doing the moderation as well. Thanks, Richard. Always great to have you about, and Lorraine as well. Have the whole gang here today. It's kind of rare. Might have even been Leven and the other gang here about as well. I'm not sure. Didn't see them pop up on my little screen there. So I think that's it. We'll get it. We send a little survey afterwards. Love to know your thoughts on it. What we can do to make these clubs a little bit better or more interesting for you. And the questions about the technique we'll put in there as well. And we'll do a little session just about the technical things that you might want to know about playing blues guitar. Is there anything I've forgotten to mention, Fan or El or Richard?
No, I'm sticking the unanswered questions on community, so we'll be sending everyone a link through email because there's still a lot of questions, but we'll try to get to them there.
Okie dokie, that sounds like a good plan. I think Richard will probably help me out with that, but I'll try and make it over there as well myself for a look-see. Anything else, El? I've seen you just popped on.
No, I think everything's good. Just a reminder that we have clubs this Thursday with Lee. So if you guys want to join, you can go to justinguitar.com/clubs. And it's, yeah, super exciting stuff.